in every segment of society, whatever the category of that we're talking about, the Pareto distribution applies. And so the top 20% and there's 20% and 80% is the Pareto distribution. And oh, by the way, the Pareto distribution applies to itself. So 20% of the effort produces 80% of the result.
Oh, it's 80-20 rule, right?
Right. And 20% of that 20%, which is like 16% of the total effort, produces 60% of the result. And of that 60% of the result, if you take the Pareto distribution again and you say what's 20% of the 16, it's like 1 or 2% of the effort produces 50% of the result. So of 20% of the effort produces 80% of the result, actually 1% of the effort produces 50% of the result. Okay. And this Pareto distribution applies to segments of a society. It's to almost anything you can imagine.
No, for sure.
In any group of people, the top 5 or 10% are going to win. They won't lose. They will just, wherever they are, that fits within their personality, the top 1%, 10% of writers will be successful writers. The top 10% of canoe paddlists will be the top 10% of canoeists. And I say that because I look out my window and there's my canoe. So I'm not in the top 10% of canoeists. I'm in the middle. I'm in the middle of that bell curve. So I'm at the number 30 or 40 out of 100. At one time in scouting, I was in my teens, I was a pretty good canoeist. I wouldn't rank myself well now, because I haven't kept doing it. I haven't maintained skills. I'm off topic. I'm missing my point. I'm distracting from my point. In any markets, in any industry, the top 10 or 20% of helicopter pilots are going to be the top 10 or 20 helicopter pilots. Does that mean that the guy, and then there's some guys at the other end of the spectrum, and when I say guy, it's gender neutral version of guy.
Right.
I was in flight school with actually, I don't remember any of the women that washed out. There was one guy who literally quit because he said, this is not for me. This is too scary. This is emotionally scary. I cannot be a pilot. There was a handful of us a handful of my class that washed out, that just could not pass the check ride. I am very glad that the top woman in my class wanted to be a gun pilot, and I got to be a scout pilot because of it. Because we were on all of our scored events, from the time we started the class until the time when they assigned us which track we were going into. She and I were tied on every score except long distance. Anything that was long distance running related, she would beat me. I could beat her on push-ups, and I could beat her and I could keep up with her on short runs. On long runs, she would beat me. On anything academic, we were tied the whole way through the course. Sometimes I would get 100%, she would get a 99. The next score, she would get a 99. I would get 100. She would get a 9, vice versa. We were competing head to head, and if she had wanted scouts instead of guns, I probably would have not gotten scouts. If she had wanted guns, but she wanted guns and I wanted scouts, and we both got our first choice. Um, in that field, we both, in that field, I was in the top 10% of the Pareto distribution. That's my point. I was like the way my brain and body are wired, I was designed to do really well in flight school, in the Army flight, in the way the Army teaches flight school.
How long is the helicopter course?
If someone were to happen to go through the entire course straight through without any bubbles, it's 10 to 11 months. But there's always gaps in between the phases where someone will graduate from one phase and the next phase won't be ready to start for an extra couple weeks. And so most people don't finish that course in finishing in less than 13 months is pretty rare. Usually it's closer to 16 or 18 months. The fixed wing guys for the Air Force and the Navy is longer than that.
It's like 3 years. Well, if it's a fighter pilot, it's like 3 years. I know a lot about.
By the time
I'm
they
like
get to alignment,
I'm like a jet junkie.
Yeah,
I know. I mean, I don't never flew them, but I know. Yeah, as much as any layman you would find. Put it that way.
Yeah. So here's, but you put me in another environment, and I'm not that top 10% guy, but I'm probably a top 30%, right? But but now the Pareto distribution is applying, and the top 10 to 20% are getting 80% of the results. And if you're the 25th or 35th person in that, out of that 100, suddenly instead of doing really well, you're struggling.
Yeah, no.
And I just want to carry this through. If you're the number 60th person, it's not that you're a bad person. It just, you look at the people that are held up as the bright shiny objects, and they're shown this is what it could be, and you're down there in number 50 or 60 or 70. Okay, if you're number 90 out of 100, maybe that's a hint that you should move on. But the problem is there are a whole bunch of us who are in the middle of the bell curve.
Right.
We're the people from 30 to 70, and we're actually doing okay, but we're not doing great, and it looks like we're struggling.
Right.
And so the whole point of the GHL business launch, and if I'm going to use this video, I'm going to have to do some editing. I'm going to have to clip out a whole bunch of me rambling there. But the whole point of the GHL business launch is to help the people who are from about number 40 to 60 on that Pareto distribution get past the hurdles and the mental roadblocks that are holding them back from actually being successful. It's not going to take somebody and suddenly make them a top 5% or top 1% kind of person. Those people are going to succeed anyway. It's the intention, the hope is that people who are the trailing element, the bottom 5 or 10 or 20% are going to realize this is not for them, and they're going to move on and do something different. But the people who are number 60, number 70, number 80, maybe, are going to get some skills that's going to allow them to at least stop being in their own way.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good.
We're trying to help some people who are in the middle of that bell curve, the 40, 50, 60, 70% tile person, actually turn their struggling hobby business into a life supporting company. Even if that's a company of one, but at least it's providing them a lifestyle that makes a difference.
Want me to help you shorten that explanation a lot?
Sure.
Okay. So this is because yeah, 80 thing is something I firmly believe in. So anyway, I was a wrestler in college, and not that I was, it's a long story. I mean, I got in high school, I was kind of standout. I did my ACL my senior year, so that kind of prevented things. And then I recovered from that grade and decided I was going to wrestle in college. And then I took kind of a year off or whatever. Or did I? It was my second. Anyway, when I was 20, I got in this. If I wouldn't have been a wrestler, it would have killed me. I mean, I was in phenomenal shape when it happened. And so anyway, using wrestling, there was this guy on my team, and we're still pretty good friends. But he was, so I probably would have been state champion in Idaho. Like, long story, I was living in Washington at that time, in Tacoma, and ended up living with my mom again. So I was kind of a big fish in a small pond in Idaho.
So you went from Tacoma, where you were a decent wrestler.
I was a standout.
And then you went to
but that's
really
not
well, and then you went
that's
to
not
Idaho.
really this. Okay. That's not really the story.
Okay, sorry.
So the story is that I blew up my knee my senior year, and that kind of nixed my high school career. So I went to Bellarmine Prep in Tacoma, by the way. So anyway, but then I get to college, and this was probably a couple years in, but a good friend of mine was Tracy Yates, and I think he was at least a California state champion, which is in the top 2 or 5%. He was
gotta be good,
but he weighed. He wrestled at 126 and 118, and I would just be screwing around with him on the mat, and it was all I could do to stay on top of him. I was 167 at that time, so I was like 40 pounds heavier, and it was. I mean, and so I kind of realized. So that's my story about that. But another way to tell that story is that if Michael Jordan would have had his druthers, he would have played baseball. But see what happened when he went to play baseball, he sucked. He was on a farm team that was not even a farm team, and he was probably only there because he was Michael Jordan. And it's kind of the same thing with John McEnroe. If John McEnroe would have had his brothers, he would have been a rock star, but he found out he has no aptitude to play the guitar. So
right. So
it's a quicker way to tell that story.
Yeah, is find out if you're in the wrong place, then find someplace else to be.
Yeah.
Yes. If on that bell curve, you're the trail end of that bell curve, and if you're at the trail end of the bell curve, then you need to find someplace else to be, because there's somewhere else that you should be, that you can be at least in the middle of the bell curve.
Yeah.
Right. And so, yes, find a place that you can be competitive. You should not be, if you're literally the tail end of the Pareto distribution, if you're in the bottom 20% of the Pareto distribution, then that should be telling you that you're in the wrong place. The people that are in the top end of the Pareto distribution, they'll always know it, and they're not even who we're talking about, right? The trick is the people in the middle of the bell curve, the people in the Pareto distribution from 20 to 60 or 70 or maybe 80. It's not that they're in the wrong place. It's that these other people are being held up as the expectation. And it's not a reasonable expectation for somebody who's in the middle of the distribution. Some things are going to take some work, if you're in the middle, where if you're on the top end, you're just going to do something and it's just going to work out. And so it's understanding where you are. If you're in that top end, if you're in that top 20, cool. you're going to do your thing. If you're in the bottom 20, okay, find something else to do. If you're in the middle, if you're in, if you're in the middle 60, what do you need to do to make yourself to be distinct enough that you can succeed, without becoming just another cookie cutter?
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to help with. We're trying to help that group of people do well enough.
You're trying to help the workhorses, not the show horses.
Yeah, there you go. That's a good. I like that a lot. That sounds like you're from Idaho. All right.
That's the slogan for my I call the sites smart sites. All right, and the subject line is: is your website a workhorse or a show horse? So,
okay.
Anyway, all right. Well, I got to go get my haircut.
All right,
but I'll take a look at that.
Especially since I sent you back to the private group, so you get in the learning module. And if you don't want to do the OmniHub course, that's fine, but do the A to Z SEO course.
Okay.
All right.
Very good.